Paul, thank you so much for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
I know your story quite well reading your book and following you for a little bit, and I'm hoping most of the audience would know who you are. But just in case they don't, you're a former competitive motocross racer, a stock car driver, a boxer, and a triathlete that then turned into a holistic health guru, medicine man, and spiritual guide. I mean, that's pretty fascinating story right there. Can you tell us a bit about that journey and how you got to living what you say is a 4D life?
Well, as a kid, I was in a very broken family, a lot of stress, a lot of violence. But the flip side of that is my real father died when I was 8, and my stepfather was a special effects man for Universal Studios and had a degree in agriculture. And my parents decided, my dad used to work for Universal Studios in their special effects department, but they decided probably when I was about 6 or 7 that they didn't want to live in LA. They wanted to raise us on Vancouver Island, and my dad and mother both wanted to get out of the rat race of Los Angeles. So they knew they had friends on Vancouver Island, and they found what's called the homestead program. And in British Columbia, they have this program where you don't actually own the land, but what they do is lease the land to you like you own it for 30 years, but you have to do something to improve the land each year, and they send an investigator out. So as long as you're doing something to improve the land, you can maintain your homestead rights. So we had a 142-acre sheep farm, and we immigrated to Canada in 1972. And so we had a thorough working farm. We had a woolen factory. We specialized in breeding black sheep to produce natural black wool, which is really popular in the native. The natives on Vancouver Island are big into sweaters and hats and gloves in the tourist industry. So my parents' factory was a woolen factory that provided a lot of the black wool for most of the natives that were doing spinning and weaving and crafts. And we had horses, pigs, chickens, cows, goats. We sold produce. We sold firewood. So it was like a full-blown working farm. And so even though there was a lot of pain and a lot of violence, my father was super, super skilled at a lot of things. So I learned a lot of trade skills. And my mother is a spinner, a weaver, a craftswoman, and a very, very skilled sculptor. And so I sort of picked up the artistic element from my mother. My mother also left Christianity and joined the Self-Realization Fellowship when I was 12, which is the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. Mm-hmm. And so getting exposed to the monks had a tremendous healing effect on me. And I got all the answers to questions I couldn't get in Christian churches, and felt a much, much deeper connection to God, to spirit, to source. And then when I was 15, my mother sent me to summer camp with the monks in Los Angeles at the Lake Shrine, which is cool because the Beatles used to go there. Elvis used to go there. A lot of the famous rock stars and movie stars go to that temple. And so I learned a lot of meditation techniques and got immersed more deeply in Yogananda's philosophy, which once my mother and even my stepfather went there for a while, but once we got immersed in that philosophy, it had a healing effect on the family. Certainly didn't fix a lot of the problems, but it was far better than what we were having in a Christian experience for sure. And so my mother and my father were both very grounded people. We lived pretty much off the farm. We slaughtered our own animals. We raised our own produce. We made our own cheese. We milked our own cows. So, my whole upbringing was very grounded in just a practical, common sense living. And I had to learn a lot about how a farm works and how nature works. And it turned out that the very principles that my family taught us kids as how we lived were the underpinning of my entire career. And I was a competitive boxer and kickboxer and motocross racer when I was young. I was sponsored by Honda when I was a motocross racer as a kid and quite successful. I raced stock cars very successfully. And I noticed early on in my athletic career that whenever I was in a small town, so whenever our football teams or hockey teams would play the city guys, we would just kill them. We just work them to death because we were all so work hardened from being on the farm. And I noticed that these guys were always eating Cheez-Its and junk, you know. So I started lifting weights at 12 and to aid my martial arts and boxing and just athletic performance. And I just had this underpinning. And then when I became, I joined the Army in, I think, 83, and signed up to be a paratrooper and ended up in the 82nd Airborne Division, and I repaired weapon systems on Cobra helicopters, but I hated the job because they just worked us constantly. I was in a 0-1 priority unit, which means you're the first one to go to war, so you got to be ready to get anywhere in the world within 24 hours. So if anything breaks, you work nonstop till it's fixed. So we were doing oftentimes 36-hour shifts. I was gaining weight. I got addicted to coffee because my job is to control the weapon system. So if I fell asleep, I could kill somebody. And I just knew I had to get out of there. And the only way to get out of there was to fight my way onto the Army boxing team. And I knew going in, I intuitively sensed I may not like being in a controlled, confined environment. And I chose to be a paratrooper because as a kid, I used to see Wide World of Sports, and they had the Army boxing team on there quite often. So I knew they had a big boxing program. It was one of their recruiting tools. So sure enough, long story made short, I signed up for a tryout. The only way you can get on the team is to beat somebody on the team. So you actually have to schedule a fight. So they weigh you, and then you have to fight somebody that's in the weight class that you weigh. And I knocked out one of their guys in the second round and took his spot. And then I was also asked to represent our company, the 82nd Combat Aviation Battalion, in an Army triathlon. And my company commander was so excited because I was setting all sorts of military records and all sorts of obstacle course competitions and fitness competitions. And he said to me, if you want to train full time for the Army triathlon, I want you to win because I'm going to bet a lot of money on you. He said, if you don't want to box anymore, I'll let you train full time for triathlon. So I said, okay, I'll do it, because I knew I wasn't going to turn pro. My fighting style was too aggressive. And there was a lot of guys on the team that were only 20 years old that were already punch drunk. We had guys at 20 years with 320 fights under their belt already.
Wow. And
so as soon as I announced to the team coaches I was leaving, they said, oh, don't do that. We'll let you stay. How would you like the job as the trainer? And you can train for triathlon after you're done with your work. So I was put in charge of nutrition for the boxers. I was put in charge of conditioning. I wrote all their conditioning programs. I implemented a massage therapy program just because I intuitively sensed it would help them. And from all my triathlon training and fighting for several months, I fought on the boxing team and trained for triathlon. So these guys could not figure out how the hell I could do that, because we train 6 or 7 hours a day on the boxing team. But the coaches and athletes all recognized that I ate differently, I trained differently, and they knew whatever the hell I was doing, it was working really well. So the coaches offered me to stay, and because I would get so sore from all the training, my wife, I would just beg her to try any kind of massage on me. And so with no training at all, she would massage me, and I would notice, wow, it would enhance my recovery radically. And I felt so much better. So I thought, well, I've got to start studying massage. So I ordered a book at the time that had just been released called Athletic Massage by Rich Fay, who is the head massage therapist for Nike at the time, and was Mary Decker Tabb's therapist and many of the other top Nike athletes. And I just started applying that to the boxers, and the team doctor noticed the injury rate was dropping really fast between the way I changed their diets and their conditioning and the massage. And so the team doctor, being an osteopath, gave me 2 years of training in how to take care of acute sports injuries. And the Army boxing team was actually the gym that was the headquarters for Army sports for Fort Bragg, which had at that time 79,000 soldiers and was the most highly competitive place in the military because of the kind of elite level of soldiers there. And so that gave me the training that I needed and the confidence that I needed and the awakening to what really gave me a deep sense of joy, which was helping other people perform better and feel better. And so at that time, I was, 22. See, I became the trainer of the Army boxing team in around January 1984, I think. And interestingly, in the 88 Olympics, 11 of the 12 fighters were actually fighters that were at once on my boxing team that I trained. So it was kind of cool. And when I left the Army, I wanted to get my license to work as a sports massage therapist, and I wanted to live in San Diego because that was the epicenter of triathlon training. So I went to the best school I could find, which was right here in Encinitas, California. And then I went from there and got my holistic health practitioner's license, which is a California state license that allows you to treat anybody holistically for any kind of a problem. And it's a very loose license, so I can pretty much do anything I want. I could use herbology, massage therapy, mental emotional coaching, really anything considered holistic. And so I just started traveling all over the world looking for the best experts on every topic that I found was essential to know about or that I kept seeing in my clientele base, such as disc injuries, neck injuries, shoulder injuries, digestive problems, gut problems, cognitive problems. And I spent the first probably 16 or 17 years of my career spending anywhere between probably 17 or 18 and $35,000 a year on continuing education. And I literally traveled all over the world as far as the Czech Republic. I did Earl Levitt and studied infant development. I worked with Mariano Roccabato, a professor of dentistry and physiotherapy from Chile. I literally traveled all over the globe. And so I kind of educated myself by studying with the people that had demonstrated excellence in given areas. And what I began to do that was unique is I started integrating each of these modes of perceiving the body with the visceral system, with the glandular system, with the diet factor, with the lifestyle factor, with subtle energy work, and eventually shamanism. And I put together a holistic system. So people started encouraging me. Actually, Charles Poliquin was the first one to encourage me to start an institute because he sent his top trainers to learn my system of core control. I'm the guy that introduced the Swiss ball to the exercise industry in 1988. Prior to that, nobody really ever heard of a Swiss ball. It was sometimes used in aerobics, but I developed the first educational videos in the world and programs in the world, how to use it in a gym safely and effectively. And that was one of the many things I've pioneered. But so in that process, I got hired by many professional sports teams all over the world, Olympic committees all over the world, militaries, big corporations, private organizations. I've worked with numerous of the top athletes in the world, too many to remember at this point, movie stars, and the sort of the word began to spread worldwide. Penny and I traveled around the world for 25 years, teaching all over the world, progressively developing people through what was then 4 years of training, which is now 7 years of training to complete my multidisciplinary training. So that's kind of as fast as I could give you a nutshell view of it.